So thank you guys for having me here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to build power-ups with Trello. Who here was at Hamid's talk just now about, Hamid was here, cool. He talked a little bit about why you should be building power-ups. I kind of think of it as like, Hamid was like, here's why you build the money printing machine. And I'm like, hey, here's how you build the money printing machine. So for those of you that weren't there, I am going to dive a little bit into what a power-up is, provide a little bit of context around it, and then we're going to talk about really what you can do with power-ups, how you can start building them, and then a little bit about submitting it and what's next. So let's jump right in. What are power-ups? If you're not familiar, this is Trello. It's boards, lists, and cards, and that's about as semantic as Trello gets for its users. We don't tell you how to use Trello. Teams use Trello totally differently. And they start building things and using Trello for their processes, and all of a sudden this question always comes up like, well, what if? How do I want to? And we at Trello have very aggressively said, no, we're not going to build that into the core part of the platform. But as engineers do, they usually find clever ways to start building on top of Trello, and this was what was happening before we had a Power-Ups platform. And a super common use case is, hey, I want to store a little bit of extra data for a card. Say it's a version number of something. All of a sudden, we started seeing in our cards titles, version numbers, and then it shows up in comments. And all of a sudden, people were sneaking data into different places. And it's like, no, that's not intuitive. We should have a platform that supports use cases like this. And so I'm going to show you here. This is exactly what the custom fields power-up does. Custom fields power-up allows you to go in, you enable it. Here's all of our list of power-ups. Scroll down, you find it, you enable it, and now all of a sudden, just like that, you've got additional functionality within the Trello experience. So I go and I click on a card. Oh, there's my custom fields button, and I'm able to put in some data. This could be a version number. This could be whatever you want it to be. I save it, and as soon as I save it, I get additional functionality, utility, on the back of a card. So this is a power-up. Provides extra perspective, utility, and functionality to users of Trello, and it's only on this one board. It's not on the entire Trello experience. So how do we do this? Let's talk about the architecture of a power-up. For building a power-up, you just have to have an index HTML connector that you include the power-up library on. We inject this into the Trello experience. It's a hidden iframe. And this is what we use to begin communicating with you and you with us to build your power-up. And so we're going to talk about two kind of different core parts of building a power-up. The first one's capabilities. Capabilities are things that you let us know that we should reach out to you about at the point in time that they happen. So this is Trello saying, hey, this is happening. You need to do something in response. You just define these in a manifest at the point in time that your power-up is loaded and enabled by a user. So board and cards are kind of like the core, the meat and potatoes, really, of Trello. And so obviously we wanted to give you hooks into those. And immediately we can see here, we've got some added functionality with some UI up in the top right there, and those are board buttons. Board buttons are an opportunity for a user to click on them. They open up new pop-ups. Here we've got an overlay that's being shown, and same list. We have a board bar. It's got our boss shouting at us to get off Reddit, and that's just one button. The other button, very simply, opens a new tab with a page on it. So let's check out the code required for making that happen. Whoa, JavaScript. For those of you that haven't come over to the one true language, also known as the dark side, don't fret. We're not going to get too deep or crazy. I don't think we're doing anything too monstrous or horrid in JavaScript. But the entire Trello platform is built on JavaScript, and it makes heavy use of asynchronous capabilities and design patterns, and very heavy use of promises. And luckily, we're able to hand it off to you so that you can use asynchronous design paradigms and promises to deliver a dynamic experience to your end users. So here is the initialization of our board buttons capability. You can see we define it, board buttons. And so this is, again, Trello reaching out to you and saying, hey, you need to do something. You asked for us to let you know when this was going to happen, and you're responsible for returning a function that gets called. In this case, nothing fancy happening here. We have an array with 2 objects, each object representing data to be shown to the user. The top one, the pop-up, is making use of callbacks. It's another capability that you define. There are 11 in total. And a callback is just another function to be run at the point in time that the user clicks on this button. Very simply on the bottom, we have the URL that the page navigates to when the user clicks that. So nothing too fancy happening there. But you can begin to imagine, like, these are great hooks that you have as a developer to get a user into a more distinct flow and to start interacting a little bit more with your integration. Similar to board buttons, we've got card buttons. And card buttons are what you see here on the back of a card. Similar to last time, we have one that just goes to a new page, nothing too fancy. And the other one opens search functionality and allows you to attach one of them to the card. So again, here the focus is we're giving you hooks right into the Trello experience. There's no opening new tabs, there's no like dialing in, not getting deep into menus. All of a sudden, you're able to inject opportunities to interact with the user right there in the core Trello experience. But Trello's whole motto is really work with perspective. And neither of these really give you a ton of perspective on, extra perspective to the user on the board. And here again is the code for it, very similar to last time. We have card buttons being declared. We're returning an array. It has objects in it. Each object represents one of the buttons being listed. And I'm going to wave my hands and say, don't worry about what's happening in that card button callback. I'll get to that in a little bit. But also, so you're probably wondering what is T and what is options. T is passed into every single one of them. It's a reference to the Trello PowerUp client library. And then options is an object that just contains information that's contextual to the capability that's happening. So in this case, card buttons, the options there are going to include who the user was, the ID of the card, the ID of the board, what right privileges exist. And so you can start digging into those to craft an appropriate response to the function being called. So like I was saying, those are hooks into the Trello experience, but they're not really extra perspective. There's no data being shown there. And I think that's where card badges and card detail badges really begin to shine. 2 more capabilities that you can make use of. Here's card badges. All of a sudden, you can, as we like to say, squint your eyes, and you can see that, oh, there's some green things here, there's some yellow things. When we look a little bit closer, they've actually got data inside of them. So let's check out the code required to make that happen. Here again, whoa, this is the 3rd time, Bentley. I'm recognizing a pattern. We have the card badges is the capability. We're having a function that is called. We're returning an array of objects to be represented. In this case, the not so exciting one is the static. It's just text with an icon. But the more interesting one is the magic number with a dynamic number as well as a color being generated and this new parameter refresh. So you can begin to imagine this is being called every 10 seconds and getting a new color, a new number. But this is not like super exciting because it's just a random number, random color. Begin to think about how you could integrate this with your service. Perhaps you have a t-shirt shipping company and you have a service that you want to reach out to and say, hey, what is the status of this t-shirt for this customer? And you're using cards to track customers. You can reach out and you can say, hey, I've got a customer on this card. What is the status of it? Oh, it hasn't left the facility yet. I need to show a red badge. Oh, it's in transit. I need to show a yellow badge. Oh, it's delivered. Happy customer. It's green. As well as data, maybe date of arrival, that sort of information. You can start showing right here on card badges. And so you can see, like, all of a sudden, just looking at a board, I'm like, oh, these are the things I need to go take care of. These are the things I don't need to worry about because everything's golden. Card detail badges are kind of the big brother of card badges. They allow you to dig in and get more information about what's happening there. So here it is on the back of a card. This is what Custom Fields is making extensive use of. You're given another UI input right there. And I'm going to pause for a second because you notice on this that the styling looks like Trello. And that's because we're doing that for you. We're giving you a style sheet that you should make use of. We want your power-ups to be delightful and fun the same way that Trello is. And so just by adding a style sheet onto what is an injected iframe, you can really begin to craft a Trello-y experience right here in the back of a card. So let's check out the code. Very similar to last time. We have card detail badges, passing in the T and the options, and returning a list, an array with objects inside of it. And this time we're just returning a pop-up that has a local file shown on it. And I'll get into what the pop-up is a little bit later on. But really simply, with just this tiny bit of code, we all of a sudden have injected onto the back of a card like extra functionality. You can begin to think again, what do I want to show on the back of a card when someone starts dialing in and diving into the details of this card in their process? What information do I have in my service integration that I can make use of to add more perspective here? One of the core components of Trello that users make use of is adding attachments. You attach files, you attach links, you attach all sorts of things. And obviously your service probably has a ton of links and things that you want attached to Trello cards. So let's dive into what's possible when playing around with attachments. Start kind of playing on this paradigm of hiding Reddit from our boss, as we all do occasionally on Friday afternoons. Here, whenever we add an attachment that is Reddit URL to the card, it gets a totally different thumbnail as well as a little bit of different text. We've added some emojis in. And so that is the attachment thumbnail capability. This gets called every single time that an attachment is on the card. It gives you an opportunity to, maybe you have like a really nasty long URL and you want to prettify it a little bit, maybe just show the slug. Or maybe you have a preview image service of some sort. Here's your chance to reach out to your service and say, hey, here's the data that this user has attached to a card. Maybe it's got the ID in it. Your service kicks back a great different thumbnail that you can provide to them. So again, it allows you to really level up the Trello experience. But let's say like this, our boss knows what's going on. This isn't good. He's like, that's a little bit, and like that's not conspicuous enough. So you're like, if only I could do more and make it look like I was really busy. And so that's what attachment sections allow you to do. An attachment section will capture a set of attachments here. I'm adding Hacker News as normal, but I really only want to capture the reddit.com URLs. And when I add one, all of a sudden I've got this whole new attachment section. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's like, boss, don't worry. Like I'm really busy crunching numbers, writing VB script. So get off my back. But this is a totally contrived example, and here's the code for it. This is the attachment sections capability that's being called, and here you can see we have all of the attachments on the card being passed in the options object, and we're able to go through and say, hey, this is one of the ones I care about. I really want to do something with this. Don't show it in the normal attachments flow. And so you grab that, and then you say, this is what I want to show in place of the normal attachments. Here I've got a really contrived example that's just an HTML page with an image on it. Do as I say, not as I do. Because what you really could start doing here is embedding your service and integration and the information it has into the Trello experience. Thinking again about, perhaps you run a social media tracking platform of some sort and someone has attached a campaign to a card. You can now go out and you can say, hey, let me go reach out to my service and say, oh, what is the click open rate of this? How many times has this been retweeted? And you can draw whatever you want in this card back and provide that extra perspective right there. So it's super easy to do. So the client library, we've like I said, there are 11 capabilities. Those are just a few of them. You can dive into more of them in our documentation. But I've been a little bit hand-wavy once or twice with like this Trello library, like these pop-ups, Bentley, where are these magical Trello-y lists coming from? And that's all the client library. Capabilities were Trello reaching out to you and saying, hey, you need to go do something. Respond back to me. The client library is you saying, hey, Trello, Go make some magic happen. And it's primarily UX and data methods that you can make use of. And so here, going back to the board buttons example that we had, we showed this nice list with options on it. They clicked on one, and there's this callback that happened. There's the board bar, and it's like, whoa, Bentley, that was really cool. What was that? Let's go check out the code for it. The code was, there we go. Here, we had this callback, the board button. What does that callback actually look like? Well, again, we're just returning t.popup, which is a UX capability, so we just draw relative to where the user is, a nice little pop-up there that you can begin to put items into. Here we have a title where you can see pop-up list examples, as well as, lo and behold, an array of objects. Each one of those objects contains information about what should be shown in that list. And again, it's callbacks all the way down. Each of those has their own callback that has some functionality. The overlay is just calling t.overlay, which gives you the ability to write on top of the Trello experience. And the board bar happens down at the bottom. So there's our overlay. You can imagine reaching out to your service and saying, hey, what can I embed into this? What adds more perspective, utility? And here, if any of you were at Ship It Live, got to see a power-up that actually made really good use of this. And you can show real-time live data right here in the Trello experience. You can show, what are the states of the multiple campaigns a user has going. It can be embedded videos, and the opportunities are abound for you to put information that your users want to know right here into the Trello experience. And I've said a few times, like, you can do asynchronous. So let's dive into what asynchronous Trello power-ups look like a little bit more. Here was our card button callback, and we were searching a list. Let's actually look at what that callback did. We were building a list of items to be displayed, and again, we're doing the heavy lifting for you. You can see we're calling t.popup, and we're not only giving a list of items like we've done previous times, we're actually passing in a new set of parameters: search, count, placeholder, and empty. And as you can probably intuit, placeholder text is text that's shown when a user begins to search through your items. The items are actually the items that you pass in. The count is how many are displayed. And so you can see that all of a sudden we can start populating that asynchronously with data from another service. So to show that, I've built one that reaches out to the Hacker News API, calls it and says, hey, give me all of the top stories and allow me to attach them to a card. So here again, you can start reaching out to your service. This is super simple, and it's important because that's only called at the point in time that the user clicks on the button. This isn't a list built, when someone first visits the board or when they first enable your power-up. The real value here is that you asynchronously, dynamically get data and give it to them. There should be no stale data. Your user should want and need to get real live information from your service, and you should provide it to them using these tools. And here again, we're doing the heavy lifting for you. You don't have to rebuild search functionality. This is part of the Trello client library, so make use of it. And this is just a little bit of what the PowerUp client library can do. We also have internationalization, authentication, and data access built into it. We have users across the world, and we want you to build power-ups for users across the world. And we know that you're going to need some state storage at some point, and so we've got data access methods in there for you so that you can store data and get data out at different levels throughout the Trello experience. Cool, so that's power-ups, but we've got this whole other thing there. The Trello client library really only gets read-only access to Trello boards. So you can read the data on the board, on the card, and then you can add attachments. But great power-ups probably want to do more than that. Maybe you want to create cards when something happens, add labels, move a card around when a label gets added. And for that, we have the RESTful API. And so what's in our RESTful API? Literally everything you can do in the web client, with the exception of authentication or logging in, you can do with our RESTful API. We have every resource that we use, the web client, the mobile clients. It's all there in the API. If you're ever curious, hey, how did they do this in Trello? Just open up the network tab of Chrome and watch the calls, because we're making calls to this. There's no private API. It's all public. So a great Power-Up is going to make use of this. And just to show you, so you don't think I'm lying, here's a basic request, here's our board, and just like that, we're able to get all kinds of information back from the API. It is incredibly abundant what you can do with the API, and so great Power-Ups will combine the Trello client library with this so that you can start doing those put, post, deletes, and really blowing users' minds. And of course, I'm not going to dive into what all is there. We have very good documentation at developers.trello.com/advanced reference. So to dig in more, go check that out. All right, so you've built an awesome Power-Up. What do you do with it? Well, first and foremost, you don't have to build a Power-Up for the world. A lot of teams actually will build Power-Ups for their own internal use. Maybe you and your team have like a really dialed-in process flow, and you want to level it up with a Power-Up. You can do that. We give you the tools to turn on a Power-Up just for a team. You guys can use it all day long. But as Hamid hopefully sold you on, you're like, we want to share this with the world. We've built something awesome. And so we've got an app submission and review process for that. All you do is check out our developer website, you submit your manifest URL to us, we invite you to a board, and we'll actually try out your Power-Up with you. We'll provide feedback and say, hey, this is awesome, this maybe could be tweaked a little bit, and then we'll work with you when it's ready to go live to take that to all 22 million Trello users. So what are we looking for when you're submitting a Power-Up? We want something that's Trello-y. We love delighting users. If you're curious what that means, like go check out the sign-up page for Trello. Go read the release notes for some of our mobile apps. We really want a Power-Up to make a user smile and enjoy using Trello. And it should be an extension of Trello. They don't need to be switching tabs back and forth all day long. Good Power-Ups allow teams to be dialed into the Trello experience. We also look for Power-Ups that provide perspective. Again, Trello's motto is work with perspective. And so you should provide new functionality, new utility. Do something that you can't already do in Trello, and do it well, which is where simple comes in. You don't have to do everything possible. I like to think of Power-Ups as being composable pieces. Like you have your marketing team that maybe makes use of that social media platform, and you have your engineering team that makes use of the Confluence and Bitbucket Power-Ups. They can turn them off and on the board as needed. And so you don't have to do the whole, you don't have to do everything. Just do a few things really, really well. And thinking about what's next. We've heard you. Automation is a key part of Trello. Like you're doing these tasks day in and day out. Every Friday you're going in, cleaning up your boards. We want to better support bots and that automation so that you can build things that allow users to not have to do those processes all the time. What good is a Power-Up if no one uses it? As you saw, our Power-Ups are all listed right there. They're in alphabetical order right now. And so it's really easy to get lost in the mix, and we want to make sure that the great Power-Ups that you guys build float to the top and that all 22 million Trello users get to experience them. Custom fields is something that we're continuing to improve. We've listened, we've heard that you want to do more with it, and so we're building a more robust API around it, bringing it more into the core experience and allowing you to access it as developers. And also mobile Power-Ups. One of the beauties of using Trello is that if you're sitting in front of your computer and you also have your mobile phone open and you do something on your phone, it immediately shows up in the Trello web experience. And so we want to make sure that we support you guys so that you can write it once, run it everywhere. And if you want to check out what a Power-Up looks like, you can actually go to glitch.com/atlas/Atlas-camp-17, and this is live right now. All of the examples that I showed today were actually taken from this Power-Up. If you're not familiar with Glitch, it's a hosted project. You can hop right into a code editor. You can remix it. You go to trello.com/powerups/admin, and lo and behold, you've got the exact same Power-Up that I showed you today and played around with running locally. So go check that out. If you have questions, if you're like, hey, this isn't something that I can do now, but I want to do, definitely reach out to us. We're constantly improving the platform and the capabilities, and we want to hear from you. We want to make sure that you can build exactly what you want to within the Trello experience. Cool, thank you.